Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Janet Foster Show, the show where you get real talk for real action. You know, we just don't talk about it. We actually give you things to be about it. You can get social with me right now on Facebook at Janet Foster, and on Twitter and Instagram, you can reach me at Janet D. Foster, and that's D for Deborah. And, thank you so much for your responses to the show. I know I said this last week, and I want to say it again this week, that I have been so encouraged, and that's one of the things that I want to relay to you, and I appreciate your support. I appreciate your tweets, the Instagram messages, and the posts on Facebook. And I noticed a lot of you are sharing my social media information, and I appreciate that, and that you're introducing people to me. And some of you have also noticed that there have been some publications that I have been a contributing writer since I am a freelance journalist, and I appreciate that as well. And definitely your continued support has given me a lot of things to be grateful for, not just your support, but also support from, based on your response, I'm getting support from a lot of the stories that I have been lining up to cover on the show. And based on last week's show, the feedback that you gave me, especially on Twitter, you gave me a lot of feedback on some of my responses to the questions that I had for those of you who were listening. Some folks didn't like my thoughts about the Muppets. You thought I was a little too hard on ABC and the Muppets, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I decided that today's show would be a kind of a part two, since you guys are just coming with the questions. And so I thought, let me answer it on air. And then as a result of our interaction on social media, I've got some new things and new things that I want to share with you. And there's also some news about the show. There's some good changes that are coming up for the show. And as they occur, I definitely will share them with you. But one thing that I want to talk about and share with you, I want to launch a fan opportunity. And this opportunity is going to give you the chance to be a co-host with me on the air. You don't need to be in the Los Angeles area. If you are, then you will actually get to meet me. But what I'm finding is we have a lot of people across the country, definitely there on the East Coast. For some great reason, I'm getting a lot of folks from the D.C. area and from Chicago that are interacting with me on Twitter, and I'm grateful for that. And so I want to open up this opportunity to fans, and how I'd like to launch this fan opportunity. What I'd like to do is use social media. And the whole idea behind this is that for those of you who are already following, and I know some of you are have been very supportive in sharing, retweeting episodes, especially when when I get release information of a new podcast that's available on iTunes. A lot of you do share those. And what I'd like to do is open up and ask everyone if you could share all of my social media contacts, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I've also been getting some requests that I need to think about Periscope. So, and I have been looking at Periscope and kind of how I could incorporate that as a part of my social media imprint. Also, a lot of you really want me to check out Reddit, because you want me to, you want to be able to ask me some questions, start interviewing me. I am looking at that as well as an option. But for now, I'd like to roll out this fan opportunity on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And here's what you need to do. you need to not only encourage followers, but also tag any of your retweets with hashtag JFO and that's J for Janet, F as in Frank, O show. So it's my first initial and, of course, the first two letters of my last name, JFO. And you want to use that hashtag. And that hashtag will allow me, I am literally going to go through tweets and look for that hashtag and begin dialoguing with fans. Because one of the things that I want to continue some of the things that you ask me, whether it's your questions about my take on things, but one thing that I find interesting is kind of networking with fans who listen to my show and you like the content that we're bringing. And sometimes I think you may have even better ideas, even better questions. And that's sort of how I got the idea that fans may even be better interviewers than I am. And I'd like to try that. I have been advised that that's kind of a risky thing to do, but I just believe in the human spirit. And I also believe that the fans that are listening to the show are people like me, where you actually want to solve issues or talk about those important issues. And I don't think we can go wrong. So I will be doing that. I will be watching your tweets, and I sure would like to interact with you. And then based on our interactions online, I will be picking fans to kind of join me shotgun here on the mic, so to speak. There, you will definitely be a co-host of the show. And this is something I'd like to do ongoing, so don't think that I'm only doing it for the month of October. This is something that I want to put in place. Obviously, I've got to work you in with the schedule of guests that we have. And it may or may not be something that might be your forte, which that's fine. And generally as journalists, journalists are never, we never are an expert on everything that we talk about. I know some people try to pretend to be, but I am not. Outside of maybe the financial markets and healthcare, those are two areas that I am an expert on, but the other ones I am not. So the things that we've been talking, I have been a listener / interviewer, and I'm trying to learn too. But I want to open that opportunity up, so be on the lookout for that. And also visit my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages where you will see that kind of information. And let's get that going, because I'd like to see if I could have start working in some fans. Also, I want to kind of address some of the questions that you had for me that I didn't get to last week, because some people said, we really liked your questions that you answered, but you didn't get to the whole list. And all I can say is my bad. Oops, my bad. And also time got away from me on that. But definitely I want to start with that. And one of the questions that I had that this one actually, I got a few questions about this week when people were contacting me about not finishing last week's list. And it has to do with the Republican debate and kind of the process that the Republicans are going through to pick a nominee. And this question kind of came up in the mix a lot, was people were just asking my thoughts, seeing how we've initiated a series discussing race. And just for those folks, I did respond back to them, letting them know that we will be getting to the Latino community. And I'll also give you today a list of topics that I am preparing for interviews, as well as subjects for upcoming shows too. But one of the questions that I got that I am going to answer, and and I want to say too to the listeners that pose this question to me, you really listen to the show intensely, because I had to even go back and think how much of myself did I share, and you picked up on something about where I've lived, and how you came up with this question. And this question was asking my take on the possibility of a Latino ever becoming president. And just for kind of a little background, when I mentioned the listeners who picked this up on my background, and I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out to the fan who actually asked this question, and it's Moises Bringas. Moises picked up that I lived in Miami for an extensive amount of time, and he may even and he's absolutely correct. That's actually where I was involved in a lot of political activities. I actually started out as a general assignment reporter in Miami for a very small cable station. It was very small, very limited, and the pay was not all that great. But and that's one of the reasons why I moved on. But I did spend an extensive amount of time in Miami, and in South Florida politics, you really have to have a grasp of activities in the Caribbean as well as South America, and of course in being in Miami, the dynamics of that city with the Cuban community, you have to be quite astute at who the players are and what things mean. So the kind of the question of if a Latino would ever become president, the second question was someone directly asked me, Moises asked me my take on Marco Rubio's chance at the presidency. And my take on Marco Rubio's presidency is it's a little bit different, because I think right now he's running to set himself up for a future run. I do not think that the current situation would be helpful to his cause. That's kind of the blunt way for me to put that. I don't think that he would be someone that the Republican Party would nominate right now, because with the whole Trump effect and with what I consider the political dog whistles that the Trump campaign is doing for a certain demographic within the Republican Party, that particular demographic would view Marco Rubio as someone foreign. And when I say someone foreign, when you try to attract the attention of the demographic that Donald Trump has basically coalesced and have them kind of standing forefront from the Republican Party, and then when you have the National Republican Party being silent about basically, I would say, I'll just go ahead and say it, racist comments. And you can't, there's a definite barrier for Marco Rubio. And one thing about Marco Rubio, and he is a Gen Xer, the thing about him that people may not understand with Florida politics is because when you think of Florida, you do think of it as a southern state. It isn't a traditional southern state in the sense of when you're thinking Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, or Louisiana. But in Florida, if you were to break that state up into thirds, you have the Panhandle. And the Panhandle, for some of our listeners who may not understand some of the terminology at how Florida relates to itself, the Panhandle is that top part of the state that borders Georgia and Alabama. that part, if you think of Florida, it looks kind of like a gun, and you think that part that's pointing towards the west, that's the Panhandle. And then you have the next third of the state, the middle part, the first part of the middle. And generally, when people talk about the second third of the state, they always talk about the area called the I-4 corridor, which connects Orlando and Tampa. And Orlando and Tampa, they anchor Interstate 4. Those are the two largest cities, and all those little itty bitty cities in between, in those areas. That's actually the believe it or not, it's the largest media market in the state. Most people think Miami, but it's not. The I-4 corridor is the largest media market in the state of Florida. And so that's one area, and you've got two huge metropolitan cities. You don't really, from north of the I-4 corridor, you don't really have very large metropolitan cities. The closest metro city that you might have up north is Jacksonville, and that's closest towards the Georgia border. But and then after you leave the I-4 corridor, the next third part of the state encompasses Palm Beach County, Broward County, Dade County, and Monroe. Monroe is the entire Florida Keys, and then Dade County basically is Miami. And then there's a couple of small, there's municipalities within Miami, Coral Gables, North Miami Beach, Opa-locka, South Miami Beach, Hialeah, Miami Lakes, and a lot of unincorporated areas. And then you have Homestead, which is incorporated as the city of Homestead, but it's in Dade County. And then you have basically the Everglades going towards the east. Well, I know I gave you a very long geography lesson, but this you'll understand my point about Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is the current U.S. Senator from Florida, and he is from Miami. And a lot of times in Florida politics, you'll see a lot of emphasis in the Miami-Dade area, Broward County, and Palm Beach County, which those three counties are pretty much heavily dominated by Northerners who have moved south. That's where the large majority of Northerners from New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and these are individuals of means, of wealth, but they tend to be Democratic voters. That's one area. And it is the most populous part of the state in terms of population. But when you look at Marco Rubio's party affiliation, being a Republican and being a Gen Xer, which is rather, it's not rare, but it's becoming more increasingly common that Cuban Americans in Miami are either independent or they vote Democratic. And when I say that they vote Democratic, it's mainly for second and third generations on. And a lot of that has to do with, I think, once coming to the United States and growing up in the country and kind of seeing the different political parties where people identify basically financially. If you basically had to work for your money, that's where a lot of today's young Cubans and I, Gen Xers, we're still young. It's not 1459 yet, but we're still there, and there are quite a few of Cuban Americans that are not from those old Cuban families in Cuba that had to leave their money behind, because you had a lot of the stalwarts. That's one of the reasons why that community is Republican. So with that in mind, keeping that concept in mind, as well as the dynamics of the state, Marco Rubio is still really rather unknown, unknown in terms of his political contributions to the I-4 corridor. Yes, he was a state legislator in Florida, and unfortunately, he's got some baggage, and that's another thing that I don't think that he'll get the nomination this year. And I actually think even down the line, it may pose a problem for him if he doesn't pursue something in Florida in a leadership position to show that he's capable of being an executive decision maker, whether it's he becomes mayor of Miami or if he runs for governor of Florida. Just being a U.S. senator, it's not going to help him based on his resume, because he was a staffer for Congresswoman Ileana Ross-Lehtner. So in Gen X terms, Gen Xers, we're just thinking, okay, he had a government job. And then the rest of us had a hard time getting jobs. He did go to law school. He did open up a private law firm, and he did become a professor at Florida International University. Of course, one of his donor friends funded the seat for him to do it. So it wasn't. It sort of wasn't a progression that most Gen Xers that we know. Some of our peers have found their way into politics. So and in terms of working in the private sector, like the majority of us, he hasn't done that. But he did open his law firm for a couple years, and then and he was the president of the Florida legislature. The unfortunate thing is, during his term and the time in the legislature, he built ties with the prison industrial complex, unfortunately. And as to date, he's benefited the most in political contributions to his campaign, whether it's to the U.S. Senate and also running for president. And he is responsible for Florida's stand your ground law, which is controversial in itself, enough in itself the way it's written, but as a result of his owning, because he was on record when that bill passed, and that particular piece of legislation has been tied to the Trayvon Martin case. So that makes him very vulnerable as a presidential candidate, and it could affect his viability going forward. And then also the fact that he one of the largest benefactors in the prison industrial complex, where they basically own have contracts within the state of Florida and elsewhere that he receives contributions from them. That puts him in a dicey situation. And combined with, I think, the Republican Party's silence and some of the remarks that the Donald Trumps of the world have done, and even some elected officials that are known Republicans, I just think that it's not going to help his cause. I think Marco Rubio needs to stand back, and if he really wants to run for president, he really needs to think about his associations. He may need to cut his political ties to his donors. He may even think about kind of looking at his party affiliation. He might do well to run as an independent, because at a certain point, if he's continuing to seek the Republican nomination, he's going to have to deal with the personalities, and that party can no longer be silent about some of the issues on immigration and also and race. I mean, that just has to happen. And Rubio himself hasn't really been a conduit in terms of discussing race or anything else. And for someone to have a law degree, for him to be as silent as he has been, I kind of think he's got a lot more work to do. I just don't think he's ready for prime time. So that's my take on Marco Rubio. Now, I want to move away from that kind of subject, that serious subject, to my review of the Muppets. I kind of mentioned that at the top of the show. You guys weren't feeling that my review about the Muppets. I had a problem with it. I really, like I said, I have a problem with Fonzie Bear, going to meet the parents and the parents talking about what would the kids look like, and the band members, some of the band members in AA. But the Muppets were a wonderful part of my childhood. I mean, I love the Muppets, and I stand by it. It took ABC 5 minutes to kill my childhood, and I see, and I will admit, fans, you could be the fans that are watching the show. I did see the entertainment ratings for the last 2 weeks, and the Muppets, I think on ABC, the Muppets has been the number 2 show for ABC. So ABC thinks they have a hit, and I don't understand it, but, to each his own. I'm just not into the whole Kermit Miss Piggy drama, and I think now I think Kermit's girlfriend is on the show too. So that whole love triangle thing, I got other things to do than to be worrying about that. But I just thought I wanted to acknowledge the fans, your feedback on that, and also too, y'all gave me a hard time about me wanting to watch Blood and Oil. And I think that show is fabulous. I saw it because I had said I was going to give it a try, and I am going to give it a try. I love the show. Don Johnson, I thought he's brilliant as an old school actor. He did his thing. And then Chase Crawford, I mean, he has really come a long way since Gossip Girl. So I thought it was great. And what I also liked about that show, the diversity in casting. And I know we've talked a little bit about Hollywood and its diversity, and this particular show, I loved it. It not only had people who had it had people who even had accents, and what I mean by accents, the black people on there were not just from the hood. They were from the islands, which I love. I just love to see that diversity. I mean, we have a woman who owns this really crappy hotel that has extremely high rent, and she's from India. So I thought that was great. And another realistic thing that it looks like this show is going to take on. I mean, episode 2 is going to be coming up. But I like how the show is actually showing some things that are in the news, because I picked that up just watching it. And this is how I watch TV. You could see where fracking was going on. And you could also see where when the industry comes in, it overinflates the prices and the cost of living in an area, because the little crappy the crappy place that I was talking about that the woman owned, she was selling. She rented out rooms basically for $2,000 a month, and this is in the middle of nowhere. I think it's North Dakota is where it's taking place, and if and I know all of you listeners are really smart and astute to know that that's actually where most of the untapped oil in the United States is. But right now, fracking is the huge activity that's going on there, and that's what intrigues me about that show to begin with. And I am looking into stories, and I'm looking to bring in experts to actually talk about fracking and the fact that a lot of our major oil companies in the U.S. hold licenses in states like North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming, and they're not drilling. And what they're doing is they're holding on to that, but then we're importing a lot of our oil. And that's a little touchy subject for me, because I just think that we need to get out of the Middle East to begin with. And that's kind of a good segue into some of the other things that you guys wanted my take on, because some of the questions that I got was that people were asking me, what did I think about kind of the outrageous behavior that happens with individuals that come to the U.S. and they claim diplomatic immunity. And some of the questions that I was getting was related to a situation here in Los Angeles that we always hear about, and it's always in Beverly Hills. And every time I look at it, when I hear when I see a headline that has diplomatic immunity implied to it, I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, what kind of dumb thing. But right now, the latest thing has been, in Beverly Hills. The police pulled over basically a Saudi prince. There's all kinds of princes, wealthy princes here in town, but has pulled him over. And basically, because diplomatic immunity, they couldn't search his vehicle or anything like that. And that's some of the questions that you guys have been asking me about my take on that. And I know some people, they just want to know, do I have a bias or anything like that? And from a personal perspective, I don't. And then it started me thinking, what do I really understand as what diplomatic immunity means and how it works? And then I realized I actually have a relative who worked for the State Department, and he himself was a diplomat. He was a part of the U.S. diplomatic corps in several countries. And so I started looking at this, and one of the things in diplomatic immunity is it's basically a certain level of insulation from law enforcement in the U.S. And I know that that's a touchy subject, and I'll just answer the listeners' questions, is that I understand what diplomatic immunity means. Do I think it's necessary in some cases? I don't. I don't. I just kind of think that if you are a guest in another country, you should just abide by those laws. And as a result of that question, I am going to look at that further and actually bring an expert in to talk about that. And White Antelope, you're the one that asked that question, and I want to thank you for that and give you props for giving us another subject to look at, because I think immunity and how it plays out, and I think how we're seeing it here in Los Angeles in this particular case, it does kind of lend itself to make you think that there's a certain level of lawlessness that people from other countries commit here in the United States. And then when we pick up the headlines, it might seem like when we go elsewhere, something happens. And all of a sudden we have our own people that are in prisons, because that's sort of how the dialogue went with the question. But I think that our immunity, diplomatic immunity, exists to basically keep relations open with a certain country. Do I think it might be enforced more or less on certain countries? Absolutely, based on what we've seen in Beverly Hills. I will say that, and anytime I see a headline, depending on the country, if that country has something we want, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's oil that we want, so we don't want to make any of the various and sundry numerous Saudi princes upset. So I'll definitely take that topic on. Also, you wanted to know a list of topics that I am working on, and I want to let you know that our next episode, we will have a visit by the humanists. And this particular subject, I wanted to bring this to the show, and some of you have picked out picked up that I am a person of faith. However, as a journalist, I can't interject myself. But one of the things that I've learned about the humanists that I think as an audience, and I think it's something that we can learn from the humanists, is the fact of how they practice just being good people. And and I know that there are some people out there who are good people. They were raised that way. And then there are some people who they're basically good people, but they need the guidance of religion to keep reminding them to be good people. And in this day and age, there's all kinds of situations and different things with people. So next week we will be talking with a representative from the National Humanist Society, and I'm really excited about that to learn more about their activities and talk about the things that they do. So be on the lookout for that. Also, in the next coming months, I'm currently right now in discussions with ministers, because I'd like to put a panel of ministers together for a conversation, just a frank conversation on religion. Because one of the things that I have started researching has been that more and more Americans are foregoing organized religion. And, lately, if you're watching the headlines, for some reason, because one minister, when I called him, I just said, I want to talk about lately, why have we seen so many mean Christians, and he laughed about that. But we're going to talk about religion. We're going to talk about, too, how in the media, it seems like now in corporate media, and some religious leaders have started to rely on corporate media to preach their gospel, how their pulpits are finding itself in our news and kind of placing Christians as victims, that whole thing. And then also we want to take on the subject of intolerance within religion, whether it's other faiths or other lifestyles and things like that. And then there's the phenomenon of prosperity and liberation gospel. That's something I have been looking at, and the headlines with one of the ministers out of Atlanta, Creflo Dollar, wanting a new jet to do ministries where his church is within a 30-minute drive of some of the worst parts of Atlanta, some of the worst housing projects in Atlanta, where he could minister there. That kind of discussion. And I know pulling religious experts together to talk about that, to kind of define those areas. I think that's something that whether you are a member of any type of religion, I think that this is something good to know. And also, I'm working with looking at terrorism in the United States. We've got these homegrown terrorists, whether it's motivated by race or whether it's motivated by hate as a result of someone's indifference to someone's sexual orientation. I'm looking at that. Also, I'm looking at hype for profits versus the real threats. And what I mean by hype for profits, you may not be aware, but there are a lot of companies here in the States that have government contracts that actually basically they exist for the reason anytime that there's any news or activity about terrorism, they exist primarily to provide products. But what's unclear is if it's for the government or if it's for public consumption. So I'm looking at that, as well as working with bringing a terrorism expert, a U.S. terrorism expert, and bioweapons expert to kind of talk with us about the things that we're hearing, because I think, Gen Xers and millennials, as the country kind of at 9/11 is that moment for us. I think that kind of gave us our perspective of what terrorism was. Because we actually, it happened here in the U.S. It's sort of for us kind of defined something new. And Gen Xers, we have some of our own peers who went through Desert Storm, and that was that first war for our generation, for us to kind of relate to that. And this will be something that I'll remind you as we get close to, once the guest and I determine a date, I'll remind you about that subject. Another subject, and a lot of you have given me feedback on this. You want me to do some interviews with people on education. Particularly, you want me to talk about public schools, and actually talk about who and find people who are actually being successful at addressing the issues for public schools and the quality. And also subjects like Common Core. You want me to get an expert to talk about that. And a lot of you are concerned about charter schools, how profiteers are basically hustling the public. That's how one person termed it. Profiteers hustling the public, trying to cherry pick the best students, to fooling the public to get public funding. So I am working on that, and I'm working on finding the right experts that are actually engaged in successful activities, because, we're not here to just let people talk about those problems. We want people who are really successful. So I've got my eye on a couple of people, and we'll get them here. And another issue that you want more information on, you want to talk about the prison industrial complex. I am lining up some attorneys who are actually a part of protesting in a way, basically supporting groups that are aligned against the prison industrial complex, and looking at reforming government contracts for those types of entities. Also, lots of questions on this about, you want me to find people who can comment on the connection between law enforcement, politicians, investors, and the group, the American Legislative Exchange. That's definitely going to be something that I can make happen, and I'm trying to make that happen shortly. Also, you want more interviews with the alternative parties, and we're going to make sure that happens. And definitely, I am getting information to presidential candidates. Some of those candidates that you haven't heard, and some from the traditional, the duopoly that exists, Republican candidates and Democratic candidates. Some of those candidates who are running in other parties, and so I'm looking at that. I'm also taking on a subject that someone, I want to get her name right. She shared with me, the Real J. Wilcox. Yes, thank you, the Real J. Wilcox, for just throwing out, can I do something about discussing the foster care system? And that in itself will be a full series. I am pulling that together, and I'd like to start that definitely before the end of the year. And the things that I'm going to be looking at, that I've already started reaching out to experts for, looking at how the youth are aging out the system, how they are being prepared for their future, things like that, definitely covering. And also, I'm going to be bringing subjects on the LGBT community. And of course, I definitely want to talk with experts from the trans community, and not just because Hollywood has deemed it in, because one of the things that I shared earlier in a few podcasts before was I usually cover during the summer. I cover pride parades for a lot of media outlets, and one of the strongest, I have to say, strongest statements that has been made was by the trans community. And I remember covering the Long Beach parade and their banner, and it was just loud and clear. Now that you have marriage, we need to talk about how the trans community is being treated. And I think, too, with the Caitlyn Jenner story being on air, that's kind of opened up a little bit of discussion for some people who may not have realized about the community. I actually want to take that on and bring in some really, I think, some phenomenal folks that I have met that could really be helpful. And this is the kind of information that I want to share, because I think as regardless to your view about the community, I think it's things that you need to be aware of, whether it's knowing about legal issues that transgender individuals have to deal with, whether it's in their identity or handling their business. And then for individuals who consider themselves to be allies to the LGBT community and the trans community in particular, there are things that I think you need to know to maybe be a better ally. So those are things that I've got on the tap. Also looking into the next financial crisis for Gen Xers and millennials, because, we lost our shirts. And then also continuing exploring the series on race. We're definitely going to talk about the Latino community, the Asian community, and then we're going to get more into entertainment. And a lot of you, too, are asking me if I could do a best of kind of and do some guest updates. So I plan on doing that. And with that said, I do want to leave you with a couple of thoughts in this episode. Once again, I just want to thank you for your support for the show. And I know these last couple of shows, I've tried to fit in so much of answering your questions. And I just want to encourage you to continue to speak to me on social media, on Twitter at Janet D. Foster, and on Instagram at Janet D. Foster, and on Facebook at Janet Foster. For sure, we will be here next week, same time, same place, and I want you to have a wonderful week, and I'll be right back next week. And thank you so much for listening.